I'm Joyce Mann with the Cloverdale Sculpture Trail, and we are continuing our conversations with Joe Hawley about his artistic accomplishments. This time, the conversation will center on hot glass, and we have a guest with us, Randy Strong, a glass artist and founder of the Glass Society. Say, Randy, when did you become aware of Joe and his interest in hot glass?
Let's see. I first met Joe probably 1972. Went over to San Francisco State to see what they were doing over there. I had built my first studio, and it was I was trying to learn how to, run equipment and things. And I went over to San Francisco State, and I ran into Joe. And I'll start this off by saying there's a lot of people out there teaching different things, and there are so many people who are not easy to their students. They don't help their students, encourage them to move forward. Joe is one of the nicest, most giving persons that I ever met, and was just a delight to constantly know and use and have as a mentor because he was so helpful in that. But that was 1972.
Wow.
That's a long time ago, Randy.
A long time ago.
Yeah.
I've forgotten all the things that I told you, like how to turn on the Lear and how to turn on the furnace, and were we putting gas into that thing or electricity?
Oh, gas into the furnace. Gas into the furnace and electricity into the annealing oven.
Okay, I'll turn on the right switch.
I've actually heard some stories about gas being natural gas.
Already had a couple of faults. We had this.
Oops! Natural gas being piped through a garden hose into your studio. Is that?
Well, that was the original piece of glass. Yeah, there was a time, Randy, that we tried to blow glass in a raku kiln out in the courtyard in San Jose City College.
Oh yeah.
For Bob Fritz, there was a friend of mine, Tom McDougall, who taught ceramics down at Fresno for years, and he had taken special studies out with Fritz. And this was before Fritz went to Wisconsin to pick up the tips of how to build a furnace. And so I was running a raku fire at kiln, solder design kind of thing, out in the courtyard. And to get that thing to run, we had a vacuum cleaner, a blower, and a garden hose. And we ran the gas through the window out of the jewelry out into the courtyard in a garden hose. Don't tell PG&E. But we piped it into the system that we're trying to get this thing to fire. And we did. We melted a little clay pot that I had made at 50%, if you're taking formulas, 50% grog and 50% fire clay, made some little crucibles and put a Thomas McDougall formula in it, which was broken Coke bottles and other crushed kind of glass. I was unsure of the exact proportions, but we actually, and we had a piece of pipe. It was iron pipe with no it wasn't galvanized, but anyway, with a big hole in the end, and we're trying to dip into the little pot of glass. He had to throw a piece of glass to get his incomplete for Fritz completed, and so he could graduate. So I was being a buddy helping him, and we got a gather on it, and we pulled it out in the air. We didn't know what to do with it. We kind of marved it on a piece of steel, and we knocked it off into little kiln that was used for enameling. It was up to around 1,000, and we got. Oh, by the way, part of the formula was a couple of teaspoons or tablespoons of manganese dioxide. Have you ever seen manganese? Like it used to be called, I understand, mold glass blower soap. It was to neutralize the iron in the glass. And
Yep.
boy, it boils up into a froth. And so we got this real bubbly purple glass. And we were so proud of that. It was just like froth. And we got it knocked off of the kiln, and it cooled down slow enough to take it over to Fritz the next day.
What year do you think that was?
That was in '64, I believe. But we took it over, and Fritz wasn't around, but Sanders was sitting there. Now, Sanders was really not too hip for glass because he was losing some of his students to glass rather than clay. And so here I come in. I have to admit I'm one of his proteges, and we had lots of intimate, private moments about the history of clay and all that. But when I bring in this piece of bubbly glass, bubbly purple glass, he says, "Oh, Jesus, let me see that." And he put it in his hand and says, "You really got something here, son." And I couldn't believe it. And you know, this was the first bubble ever that I had even come close to, but other than some Mexican glass. But
That's great.
that was a fun morning to see Sanders' eyes that wide for
You know, it was back in those times that everything, it reminds me of that TV show MacGyver, is that we really didn't know too much about what we were doing, but somehow managed to pull off something like glass, but you know, just by bits and pieces and paper clips and hoses, rubber hoses, you did it. And I know that
dangerous it was. Yeah.
That Donald Carlson was with you at San Francisco State when you built your first furnace there.
Right.
And he helped you do that. And of course, I knew Donald because Michael Cohen and myself had gone down to see Donald at his studio in Pacifica.
Right.
And we got this big story
right
about this whole thing. And he showed us some pictures of the first glass studio. Of course, that was at San Francisco State. And you also were working over in Marin at
the Sausalito Art Center.
At the Sausalito Art Center,
right,
where you built a glass studio.
Well, I was helping my wife get that established, because they had first asked me if I could do both, and I said no, but I have a wonderful woman here next to me who can do this, and she was really a charmer. She could get electricity out of the sky, you know, and make things charge. But I don't even know what I'm saying there. But anyway, she charged me, and we built a furnace. She helped me build my first furnace at San Jose, so she knew what she was doing.
Say who you're talking about.
Sam Hawley.
Hawley.
Yeah.
A gigantic person in a small frame.
You've got it.
No kidding.
She could carry a load of brick that you couldn't believe.
So you
know, she was the Wonder Woman of that day.
Yes. Well, she had a lot of backup, because she had guys lined up out the driveway trying to get into her class, and she says, "No, I don't need all of you. I need an electrician." And she had a guy named Pepe, and she needed a couple of welders, well, a welder, you know, all the things that it takes to put together a studio. And she could set the bricks and all that, and know how to make that. The one thing that Sausalito did was she could get materials from everywhere. And one time she got some cullet from the East Coast, and they were cooking hot dogs off the flame of the face of the furnace, and I noticed this yellow kind of discharge around the face of the furnace, and I said, "Hey, you're cooking hot dogs in what? What is this yellow?" And she said, "I don't know. It's a new cullet." It was a lead glass,
Lead glass.
and they're cooking their
Jesus.
hot dogs in it. And I said,
Oh my
"Stop!"
God.
And got them back on track and back to soda lime.
Yeah, it's the same place we got it. I mean, most of us at that day got our cullet when we could afford it from, what was his name? He was buying it from a big company. And I will remember his name as soon as I try not to remember it.
Yeah, okay.
O.J. Gabbard.
Gabbard, yeah.
Gabbard,
right,
O.J.
okay.
Gabbard, who was,
Yeah.
and one of the things about you and glass is, none of us knew what we were doing, even though I had come from ceramics and moved in and was moving into glass.
Yeah.
And we all had that thing of forming forming a cup. And of course, none of us were almost qualified to pick up a glass blowing pipe, no matter whether it was a steel tube we got from the
Which
junkyard.
end? Yeah.
Which end was really, I mean, that was my first introduction when I went to pick up one of the pipes, and a girl had picked it up and heated it up really hot the front and put it down on the bench, and it cooled off, and I picked up the hot end.
Uh-oh.
Oh my
Yeah.
God. And people
Well-
asked me, said, how often do you get burned? And I said, well, I mean, you asked about smarts. I don't have to get burned more than once
Right.
in that sense, but I think that, going back to those days, your teaching, the way you taught was more, it was outside of the classroom. It was more of like sharing. You shared about things. You shared about experiences, so that
It's really called it's common sense. You can do it, and pointing them in the right direction. Not that I got the answers. Just say, there it is. Go for it. You know what you want to do.
Even if you didn't have the answers, you're very good at saying, I don't have the answers, but I know you can do it. And you were very encouraging, which is, I came from a junior college where I was studying ceramics and moved to California College of Arts and Crafts. And I helped them build the first furnace at the school there.
Yeah.
And that was 1969.
Yeah. Was that
70.
Was that with
Ruth Tamura,
right?
Who really, and she had just graduated and she was just starting her teaching, and she said, "Well, we're not going to blow any glass," and well, there's a whole story there, but that's why I came over looking for education, and what I found with you was, something that you don't find with many teachers, which is, honesty, which I don't know how to do that, but I think that if you go try it, you're going to learn something.
Right.
It's kind of like that old adjective is, I learned how to fail 100 times, but I learned 100 times what not to do. And you were very supportive about saying, well, go try it again. I bet you this time you'll do it. And, so between you and Peter Volkus, I was, really, you were the two people that were very encouraging and very supportive in both failing was a learning lesson, and it wasn't a failure as long as you learned. And
Yeah.
those were words that stuck with me forever and has actually brought me through some pretty dark times. And I actually tell everybody I know that asks me anything that same thing. I pass that on. That's all I
Yeah.
can do is
All
pass
right,
that
but-
on. Is failing is only if you fail to learn from the experience and
Yeah,
then you fail. But a failure is like that we don't fail, we learn. And that's what you taught me. That's you gave me that information. And, I mean, to a 18, 19-year-old kid,
Yeah.
I was just so hungry for any
that young?
information.
Hey, one of the things that I, through this experience of teaching, and was my wife, Sam, was learning how to do stained glass. You cut glass, lead it, and do that, make windows, and that was very, very popular in the 60s. And we didn't have the furnace built yet, but so the students in my class called crafts, beginning crafts, said, can we do some glass? And my mind went to my experiences in San Jose was that I don't have a furnace, and so but I can direct you in the way that my wife is doing, and this is called glass construction, which was making a cage or an enclosure of some sort out of plate glass and lead. And so we by the common sense, none of us had ever cut a piece of glass and in this class, and we tried a number of things, and we finally I would go home and get information from Sam, and she would send me back to school the next day to give a demonstration in cutting. And so we, without having ever made a stained glass box or window, I directed them, passed on the word about how to do it, and we got some wonderful stained glass windows and ideas, and few kind of little constructions out of it, and it was a fun experience. And then by the next semester, Don and I and another lab assistant went out and built a lean-to next to the sculpture hut, which was some plates of aluminum roofing, and this. I brought this furnace up from a stack of brick, which used to be a furnace, up from San Jose, and an old kiln that we had salvaged from the city college, and we were cooking. We were cooking some glass. And
What year was that?
that was in 60. 3 or 4, I think.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, right now I can't.
That's what Donald Carlson told me. It was 1964,
Yeah.
and he has pictures.
Oh, cool.
of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Great.
cool. This is the first glass studio at San Francisco State, and
Yep.
with Don Carlson,
Don,
my dad.
Don was hard. Yeah, starting there. He teamed up with a guy named Bob Benares. Bob was his partner down in Pacifica, and I
Right.
didn't know that they had gone over there to rent this house and set up a studio in the backyard. And I noticed they were kind of being suspiciously absent around the glass yard, which I called it at that time because it was just a outdoor space. But anyway, they were, and finally they revealed that they had gone into partnership, they call it, for this studio, and then it was great beginning for them. It was all a genesis of idea and learning experience, and a lot of people got their start either here or there at San Francisco State or San Jose and Sausalito. It was a wonderful time.
And there was Cal Berkeley and California College of Arts and Crafts.
Right.
And it was, there were more institutions of
Right.
higher learning, which I always referred to it as institutions of lower stupidity, because we were all running around with our head in a cloud, and we didn't know what we were doing. But,
Right.
Somehow, one of the interesting things is none of us blew up the building.
Or burn
I
down
mean-
the building.
Or burn down the building.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, or burn down the building. I mean,
Right.
we tried over at California College of Arts and Crafts. We tried a number of times to blow the building up. But,
Yeah.
back in those days, we didn't have any equipment that would monitor the flame or anything. We just turned
Right.
on the gas, hoped that the air came through, and we lit the furnace. And of
Yeah.
course, if the flame went out, we would go back up and stick a torch in there. And there were a few times that furnace blew up on me
Yeah.
and sent me across the room flying.
Yeah.
Wow.
And in those days, I would fly across the room, hit the wall, get up laughing, and thought that was a great thing.
Yeah.
What an experience.
I'm glad you didn't get hurt, buddy.
Oh,
I learned
Yeah.
my lesson on the kilns at San Jose, because before we had the glass furnaces, I was the lab assistant and I had to light these big old Denver kilns, and they had a firebox in the bottom, and they had a plug we used to have to light it through with a torch, and that little time lapse of building up the gas in there would blow the plugs out of the end of that furnace, drive them across the room, and scared the living out of me.
Jesus.
Yeah, it got. It only takes a few big pops to make you learn.
Well, that's what it was like. I mean, our annealing ovens, we'd put a torch in there, heat it up. We didn't know that we didn't even have little
pyrometers.
pyrometers, that we bought that were for like electric annealing ovens that would
Right.
burn up real quick because the wrong
From a couple.
the part we stuck in there would get too hot or something, and it
Yeah.
wouldn't read right. So the damnedest thing is that we're just literally finding our way in the dark, and anybody that knew anything, and there was the thing is that's why I came over to see you, is that you would share that you didn't know that much, but try this. And that
Right.
was like magic, because it would give you, it's like, you don't know what street. And she said, well, try this street, try this one. And if it doesn't work out, come back and see me and we'll see what we can do.
Where I went off track rather than this philosophy is when the temperature control on some of that equipment started to become digital. And
Yeah.
oh God, that still has me confused. I have a visual problem now, and I can't read the information that it gives me, and so give me a bunch of buttons to push and so forth, I'm in trouble.
Right.
So I would be better off to go back to the old style of putting a pyrometer, a thermocouple in the side of the kiln and reading that than
Watching the gauge.
watching this gauge,
Or
yeah.
get somebody else to do it for you,
Or get,
right?
that's what I do is
Yeah.
go to the students
Yeah.
and ask them, hey, how do you turn this thing on?
You know what? You could talk a little bit about think we wanted to talk about the work that you did with the Yonis recently, because that with Buster and those guys in the Glassfire Studios. That was a kind of a later the last glass project
Right.
you were working on.
One of my last blown project, there was a guy that came up from San Luis Obispo, Buster Simpson, yeah.
Yeah, you know him.
Buster Simpson.
I love him. He's he and his wife Trish
And Ferd,
are givers. And
Yeah.
then Ferd, who Thoreau,
you know him?
he's a master glass handler, and anyway, they were working over in the Glassfire studio in Fort Bragg, and I wanted to see what they built $1 million studio there, a gallery combo, and I was very impressed. And they started firing with electricity, and electric kilns.
Yep.
And glow bars, which heated the glass, and I didn't know anything about it, but I asked them to help me with this project, and the project was doing a series of objects. I call them space yonis. Now this sounds like a space vagina, and it looks like one, but it was this beautiful donut shape, and I didn't want to call it a black hole, and I wanted them to, and I took over a model of it that I had made in clay, and then they kind of laughed at the idea and proceeded to help make it for me, and because this was after I hadn't been blowing glass for a number of years, and I knew I just really was over my head. Well, Ferd's a handler. I couldn't believe he's blown some, even for me on this project, some like 30, 40-pound pieces that are, imagine a 40-pound donut on the end of a 5-foot pipe. It's a trick to handle. And he was able to do it. And all I had to do is show them the design and give them some directions on the color, and we got it done. And I rented the studio for the day, and the two guys to help me, and one woman who wanted to jump in on the project. Anyway, these guys were so ahead of it because they were using all this modern equipment, electromelts, and I was very thankful for their input on this. And I was supposedly a seasoned glass blower. I didn't know how to turn on the furnace because it was a completely different system.
Well,
Thank you, Buster. And
this is the, you say I was supposedly a seasoned glass blower. Talking with Donald Carlson yesterday, he was so adamant about this guy who's 33 years old, who does these huge fish and huge turtles. And he says he's got such capability, and we got into this heated discussion about the fact that he thought he was the best glass blower. And I said, everybody is built, it's kind of like leapfrog. Yeah. Without one of these people in that spot, you never would have gotten to this, or maybe you would have, but through something else. And I said, all the people, and I spoke about him, Donald, Donald, a lot of this is built on the back of Joe and what he did. And it's not how good you are as a glass blower, it's your where you are in that line, that progression of people that you take you out of that part, no matter, you know, your ceramics is out of this world, and your glass, as I've told you, is phenomenal. And it's a lot of it isn't blown. You know, when I walk into your house up there, all the little colored balls that I used to throw away or sell for 50 cents,
Yeah.
you took those and stuck those into the where the
Woodpecker holes. Yeah.
woodpeckers had poked holes, and it was probably one of the most amazing colorful things. It really outshone any stained glass window because it was like lights of different colors coming through that I just wish people could see it because it was so transformational for me.
Hey, thank you.
And so you talk about how good they are and you weren't, and I say, you know, you were great in a particular scenario of being the person to be in that spot, to have abled
Right.
all of this to come
Thank
along.
you.
And I don't think I don't know if you see that is that take you out of that equation. And how many people, and I'm not kidding you, I mean, Donald Carlson's blown more amazing amount of glass
Yes.
forever and ever. And he's a wonderful glass maker. And he has people that have bought from him for what, 45, 50 years because you were there. Not, you know, if he hadn't walked in,
Get it
he told me if he hadn't walked in and met you, he'd be wearing a suit and tie and sitting there. Of course, he says he probably would have started a big company and been retired, but he wouldn't have been, but he wouldn't have been as happy as he is because he loves creating, you know.
You know, about the same time, who was the guy who made you were talking about this guy who made big hot glass turtles?
Yes.
Was that Rick Strini?
No,
In Hawaii?
Donald wasn't talking about Rick Strini, but you know, Rick was down in San Jose, and
Rick moved to Hawaii, and I went and saw him.
Yeah,
and he's making these big turtles now. Big. You know, Jordan and I went to his show in Maui, and they're big hot glass turtles, and they're beautiful. And we timed it right, and he's cornered the market on glass turtles, I tell you.
On Maui.
Yes.
Maui, yeah.
Especially in the islands, because shipping and packaging is such a thing. And then, as you know, the education about glass making is, you know, a big part of us being glass makers.
Right.
But business, you know, business is a big part of being able to continue as a glass maker because you can pay your bills. And, you know, there's a lot of people.
That's where I had a little problem.
Well,
teaching paid the bills, and I didn't have to depend on the market, thank God. I could meet people, help people, and get on the road, because Rick Strini was one of my first seekers of information too. He came down to my San Jose studio, Sam and I's place. It was a gallery on the front part, and in the backyard next to an old tree was a furnace, our first furnace, and he leaned over the fence and he says, "Hi, I'm Rick, and I wanted to take some notes as to what you're doing here." And I knew his brother. His brother at the time was a student of mine.
Yeah.
And he had gone over to Germany to find out some information with Erwin Eisch. In his studio. And so anyway, he says, "I want to give my brother a treat when he comes back from Germany. I want to have a furnace set up like yours in my backyard, my mom's backyard, And I said, oh, well, I'll give you anything I've got here. You take a look. And he took all kinds of information and measurements and counted the bricks. And within a few months, he had a furnace going in the backyard. Of course, then he had to deal with an electric kiln to make a leer and all this. But we got the idea. And he had that furnace going when Bob came back from Europe and said, wow, what's going on here? And they were leapfrogging in information. Bob had gone off into some pretty incredible years of sculpture,
Right.
not just glass, but Rick stayed with glass all these years, and he's way out ahead of the game.
Well, you know, it's a fine line that a lot of us walk between being making glass to pay the bills and making glass as an art form, which when I was casting sculptures and started doing the sculpture on the weekends, people would say, that's really wonderful, but what do you do with it? You know,
Right.
because glass, you know, back when we were developing, has been known as basically a functional item. And we've been fighting the same fight that ceramics had as to
Yeah.
be accredited
I
as
didn't want to get in that same trap.
yeah,
Because I'd been I got out of the functional ceramics in my teaching push for the edges, and
yeah,
I wanted to do the same with glass. So in my master's degree that I had been working on at San Jose State to keep my job at San Jose City College was to combine glass with clay and other materials. And I had an idea that you could blow glass into a clay vessel. And this old glass blower from Mexico said, you know, it's compatible. And I said, oh, yeah, I'm sure it'll work. They're blowing glass into little metal bracelets.
right.
And a wonderful kind of like little drinking glass with pukas on the side. And it's bulging and so forth. And I was going to try to do the same with glass and clay. Well, it did not work very well.
No,
And
I did the same thing. And it didn't work.
no, it didn't work very well. The guy was right, and so I had to try other things, and so I was combining it with clay and metal and lead pipe and everything else, which I sometimes blew into and sometimes I didn't, and sometimes I was gluing it on, and sometimes, you know, anything will work to get to that form that you're reaching for.
Now, I'm gonna cut in here to
Sure.
give you another kudo. You know, and I know that this is embarrassing to you, but what the hell? You know, I'll say this is that, you know, over at California College of Arts and Crafts, there, this guy came down from Cal and said that he should be teaching there. And he asked me to have a petition sent around to have him hired as the teacher. And I've never said this on a video thing. Maybe it's recorded.
Yeah.
But Marvin Leposky was getting eliminated from Cal Berkeley because
Right.
he had a problem where he threw a piece of glass at one of the students, and the student that he threw it at was majoring in law.
Oh,
And so,
Uh-oh.
and his name was he became a lawyer here in Berkeley, and he helped me out on a few cases. But
Really?
but Marvin and came down and he says, I'll make you a superstar. But you know, he had some concept about doing non-functional art, but he
Right.
could not communicate, he couldn't inspire. he taught from this perspective of kind of the other end of the thing. He was very difficult. He pushed, he yelled at people and stuff like that. Whereas you were out there testing, trying, and you kept encouraging.
Right.
And that kind of teaching is what has so many people, because Benares, Carlson, Lundberg's, all of these really major glass makers have had so much, been affected so much by you, including myself, and it's just because the way you go after an art you're very curious. You wonder if you can do this. You don't think about failure. You just think about, hey, I can try this. And you inspired people to try, to go on. And that's probably what I wanted to say is one of your most amazing legacies, is that
Well, thank you.
there aren't that many people that inspire their students to go and fail and succeed at failure. And
Well,
and
I've had a lot of experience with Marvin, and he's a yin yang kind of person.
he's unique.
And we had once I was teaching in Hawaii and running the glass seminar for graduates, and Marvin came to visit, gave me a little head notice and lead notice, and I said, well, now I told the class, be careful. This guy is difficult to deal with, and he gets triggered, and so they made him out to be a dark character. But Marvin came in and gave of him some good, honest opinions to the seminar, talking about glass and the development of it and so forth. And the students came back and said, Jesus, Joe, he's not at all like you painted the picture. And I said, no, he was on his positive side this time, and he came out a hero. Because he was a giver at times. Another case was when I had a student assistant that was just out of the Marines, and he was having a hard time barking at the students at the furnace or coming into at San Francisco State. And it was a difficult person to deal with, and he would start barking at me, and I didn't put up with it, and I fired him. And he went over to Berkeley, and Marvin hired him, and he started barking at some of the students at Berkeley, and and so he said, Marvin went up to him, to this guy and the old Marine, and he said, hey, around here I'm the bad guy. Yeah, you're fired. Get out of here. Says, I don't need two of us. But I like the way that he turned it around when it was necessary to turn it around. And I want to give him credit for the gift of bringing in so many glass ideas to Berkeley. And he was having a student glass art seminar every other week over there. Fritz Dreisbach, blown glass in drag, and other people that would come over, and anyway, it just was.
He did bring a lot
Yeah.
of other things, and and to say something about Marvin, I think he had good intentions. He just was challenged on how to inspire. And
Yeah.
that's for me, as I've taught at University of Miami, I've taught at LSU, San Francisco State, because you brought me in there, and UC Cal Poly,
Right.
San Bernardino. I've taught at a lot of schools, and I think for me that inspiring the students is always the way to do it, and to educate them to say, hey, go out there and try it. You never
Yeah.
know what's going to hit and miss, and
You gotta do it. Yeah.
and stuff like that. And unfortunately, well, I mean, Marvin did bring in a lot of teachers to teach. He brought them in. Joel Philip Myers. He
Right.
brought in different people to do demonstrations, and to these and and it worked out in a lot of ways to help students see different people's things. So there were things that he really did that was very helpful. But in my book, from what I've experienced with Fritz Dreisbach, my first teacher, who I will give a shout out to, is Robert Hodgson from ceramics at Diablo Valley Junior College at the time.
Uh-huh.
And of course, Peter Volkas, who was my, closest to me, my mentor there. They really inspired me, and that was really important to me, rather than the opposite end of that scale of, challenging you in that other way. But when Lepovsky was out on the road, and I saw this and heard this many times, he changed his tune. When he was home, he was king, and things were a certain way. When he's out on the road, he was really nice to people.
Well, I have to add a little story to follow up on this, because Marvin, so totally, the year of 1970, when I took a sabbatical, as soon as I got the tenure, I took a year's leave of absence from the San Francisco State, and just wanted to do some traveling. And my wife at the time encouraged me, and kind of kicked me out of the house and said, go, go, go. And I did. But I had to take, and I publicized the job as sabbatical replacement. Joe Hawley going away for a year, and so forth. Anyway, I put the job out, and Marvin put in a resume. A number of people put in resumes. All had experience in glass. Ruth didn't. She was already in Hawaii, I think. But
Dick Marcus.
Richard Marquis. And I'm having old age.
I was having it too.
Dick Marquis.
I'm reaching for a name. Yeah.
Dick Marcus.
Well,
Mr. Millie Fiore.
all of the people who applied for the job, and Marcus had just come back from Italy, and he had learned Marini making and things like that. Yeah. Oh my God, it was exciting, and his slides really flash. These are the students who are going to be working with him, not me, because I'm leaving the country. So I had them vote as to who they want to work with, and Richard Marquis took it hands down.
Yeah.
So I recommended him to the faculty retention committee to hire this guy, and Marvin called back and he says, "Hey, what do I have to do to take the next step?" I said, "Well, what they?" I said, "I'm sorry, but they took they selected the students, Marquis." And he says, "Joe, I didn't want you to put me in competition with my students." And God damn it, he slammed down the phone. Maybe he did it, maybe he didn't. The next time I actually saw him I was in Venice, just coming out of the Venice Biennale, and on the canal there, and who do I see walking down towards me was Marvin, Johnny Toso, and Kathy Baum, one of my students back in the state. And he came up to me, he said, I don't know whether to shake your hand or give you a fist. And I said, take your shot. That he didn't. And we had a peaceful kind of reunion, and we toured Johnny's little island there, and saw lots of glass making and learned a lot together. They were a pretty good team to be touring Murano.
Well,
Yeah.
you know, to key into that, you know, Don Carlson, and I keep bringing up his name, and I wish he were part of this interview, because he had pictures of these things you did where you lined up, you got all the taxi cabs to all converge in one spot at one time in San Francisco. And you took a picture. I don't know, you must have hired somebody in a plane at that time to fly over and take a bird's eye view picture of all the taxi cabs that lined up. And you know, the way you approached, you know, you were all over with your vision.
Well,
let
me tell you how that started, because that started from my frustration with the scale of glass as I saw it at the time. I really became frustrated how fragile it was, and how much glass you could gather on the end of a blowpipe and didn't see beyond that. And then I met Mel Henderson, who another professor at San Francisco State, and we got together on some ideas. And so we started using larger spaces. Space is a very important thing for sculpture to exist in, and space needs idea. Now, we had the San Francisco, we had the Bay. I put an ad in the Chronicle, and it said, local artists seeking the assistance of airplanes to survey sculptural possibilities in San Francisco Bay Area. We had a few pilots to call, and we had a reception for them at Mel's studio. And one of the pilots happened to be a student at San Francisco State, Robert Campbell, and he became the most accessible and most helpful. He had a little plane called a Helio Courier. Helio Courier is a short takeoff and landing plane that could fly backwards through the Golden Gate Bridge if you decided to. I'll explain that to you later, but it's not important to my story. He took us up over the Leslie Marsh Flats, over the city. And we challenged many of the rules of flying in such a plane, and we would go up and look and see things on the ground and see spaces in the landscape that we wanted to do. So we would have these brainstorming conversations in Mel's studio, and then my studio in South Salito, which took us to some interesting concepts.
Oh, yeah.
One of them was this taxi cab idea, which actually started as a concept. The concept was, how about if we I wanted to make it a line of Volkswagen convertibles, you know, yellow, and all driving in the city in a line. I could visualize this little yellow snake going in the
moving sculpture.
Oh God, it was wonderful in my mind. Well, while I stepped out to get another six pack, I came back to the meeting, and there was this Mel had taken it a step further, and he said, "Well, we don't have to get Volkswagens. We could use yellow cabs." Great idea, Mel. And so we took off because yellow cabs was
Yeah.
available, and we didn't have to have $1,000 a car to make it happen. And so we took it into the concept, and with a handful of little postcards, we sent them out to all our patrons and friends, and to be at the corner of Market in Castro on a Wednesday at noon. Catch a yellow cab from wherever you are and time it, because it's more expensive to come from the airport to Market in Castro than it is downtown. Everybody can't get their cab from the same place. So anyway, yeah, it was a wonderful convergence, and
Yes.
we were given a lot of credit for, what did they call it in
Like a flash mob.
a flash mob. That's I didn't even know what a flash mob was, but
A taxi cab flash mob.
yeah,
exactly.
it
It
was.
was.
Yeah.
Sent by post.
So
Right.
you were so far ahead of everything by about what, 30, 40 years.
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess so,
Yeah.
but I didn't know it, and I'm probably good.
But that was a reaction to the restriction
Right.
of glass. Huh?
It didn't.
I know.
Yeah.
I know Don has a picture of the taxi cabs that you
Yeah.
showed. And at our little lunch we had a couple of years ago, I showed the picture. Don brought them down, sent them to me. And I'm looking for it. Maybe we can get it we can't get it soon enough to get into this article, but eventually we'll get it there.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, it was,
I have one from Bob Campbell, who was also a photographer, and he took some pictures from the airplane, and he's given lots of photographs to us. But anyway, he took an exceptional photograph. Another thing we spotted from the air, thanks to Robert Campbell, was over near Richmond at the Long Wharf, they call it. Chevron was spilling oil into the bay as they loaded and unloaded these big tankers. And you could see the glistening on the bay. And we said, Jesus, look at what they're getting away with. And so what we did is went over to Berkeley. Well, first of all, we had some sailboats that we were going to rent to learn what to do, what kind of dye we use. We used sea marker dye that the Coast Guard was using, and it was supposed to be beneficial to the, well, I'd say beneficial, not harmful,
Non-toxic.
non-toxic for the bay. And we ordered it from LA, and we just diluted it down, put it in 5-gallon cans, and took it out in the bay with in Sausalito, where next to my studio there, and we did some tests on the bay. One of those tests, a woman who had a sailboat in Berkeley was volunteering her sailboat to use as a, well, we didn't get to Berkeley fast enough because we rented a boat off of Casas Marina in Sausalito. And as we got out there, we're spilling little bits of this dye in the boat. And oh God, this rented sailboat came back spattered with red dye. And the guy that was helping us, Dennis Beal, a printmaker, his hands were totally red. There was no contest as to who did it. He was red-handed caught. And we were on the bridge, Golden Gate Bridge, looking down at these patterns of dye. We said, this is going to work. And we next trip, we went to Berkeley to get the sailboat, and People's Park demonstration had just happened in Berkeley, and we got arrested because we were dressed to go sailing and we looked like demonstrators, and we all got thrown in jail at Santa Rita for overnight.
Thanks, Joe and Randy, for reminiscing, and I'm sure you two guys could just chat all afternoon. Unfortunately, our time here is up. So thanks for watching, and please join us next time as we continue our interviews with the amazing Joe Hawley. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.